Gilney, and I welcome you on behalf of the League of Women Voters Delaware. This is our third Zoom in a series we call Successful Delaware, Healthy, Housed, and Educated. Tonight we will focus on the crisis facing Delaware citizens over available, affordable, and quality housing. We have assembled a panel that is well versed on the topic, and I welcome our panel, which we're waiting for one more panelist, and I'm hoping he'll pop on before I finish. Tonight, we will focus on this crisis. Senator Russ Huxtable represents Delaware's 6th District. Matthew Heckles is Delaware's Cabinet Director and Director of Delaware State Housing Authority. Karen Speakman is Executive Director of Neighborhood Good Partners. David Edgell is the Director of the Office of State Planning Coordination. He previously was the Principal Planner with OSPC focused on Kent County and performed other statewide planning roles. Dave has also graciously agreed to be our facilitator tonight to keep things moving and will provide more information about our panel members as he introduces them. To be more efficient, we ask that you enter your questions into the chat, and Christy Galeen will pass them on to the panel. I'll add that an in-person League Day will take place on April 8th at Christ Church in Dover at 9 a.m. Registration for that event can be found on the League of Women Voters Delaware website. At our April 8th event, we hope to draw from the insights gained on our 3 Zooms. We have assembled a panel of legislators who will discuss the policies and legislative changes needed to move Delaware towards success with health, education, and housing. I thank everyone for being here tonight to learn more about the housing challenges in Delaware. And yes, our Senator Russ Huxtable is in the house. So Dave, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm getting nodded heads. Very good. So welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here. Glad so many people turned out on the Zoom to talk about this very important topic. What Mary asked me to do to start is to kind of give an overview of comprehensive planning and zoning and talk a little bit about the role zoning has in our affordable housing crisis, and just give you a few tidbits of sort of some things that can be done to address these challenges. So I am a planner by training. I'm the director of the Office of State Planning Coordination. By way of background, our office does work with our 60 local governments in Delaware on their comprehensive plans. We have 3 county governments and 57 municipalities. And in Delaware, which is not unique among states, but we think it's pretty special, Delaware does require local governments to prepare comprehensive land use plans. Those plans, the contents of those plans are defined in the Delaware Code. Our office works with the local governments to help them, prepare the plans, answer their questions, provide technical assistance, but it's really the local government's responsibility to prepare those plans. In those plans, they address all manner of land use issues, economic development issues, environmental issues, all types of things are in those plans. But notably in Delaware, our municipalities, over 2,000 population, and counties all have to include an affordable housing element in that plan. So as a part of that, they evaluate their housing stock. They look at their data about housing and housing needs, often using the data provided by the Delaware State Housing Authority and their housing needs assessment and otherwise. And they come up with goals and objectives about how to support affordable housing. And, at the end of the day, it really comes down to their future land use map, which is what areas of their jurisdictions are identified for current and future residential use. And often they sort of leave it at that. and that's where we get into zoning. Zoning is a term commonly used to refer to the actual regulations, the land use laws, and the rules for what a property owner can do on their parcel of land. So the comprehensive plan sets the vision and the goals for the community and specifies areas for residential use, but the zoning or other land use regulations really define on that parcel of land what type of house or how many houses or what types of residential buildings you can actually build and what those specifications are. And zoning has a very long history in the United States. And, you know, it really, the whole planning movement started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Zoning became popularized in the early part of that century. And by, 1926, the Department of Commerce, of all places, really put out, standard state enabling legislation for zoning, of which, is really interesting that Delaware still has that language in place today from 1926, kind of dictating what local governments can do regarding their zoning. And I'm going to jump to the chase and the real sort of issue at hand here for affordable housing, because as a planner, I could talk about zoning all night and you all would probably tune out, but I will sort of spare you that all that detail and just tell you what has happened over really about 100 years of comprehensive planning and zoning practice. Is that by and large, and this is, I don't want anybody to take this as being every single local jurisdiction or every single case, but by and large, most local governments really have a very cautious approach to the implementation of their comprehensive plans. And as a part of that cautious approach, local elected officials generally want to make sure they have a say in what gets built and where in their community, which is their role and their responsibility. And in doing that, the safest thing to do is to zone that residential land they've identified for future development in the sort of base, we call the base zoning, or the lowest density residential zoning, which often is some form of single family homes, often on not large or larger types of lots. This housing, if you're to build that housing, it's obviously housing that is, more expensive to build and larger and a higher price point. And the idea being that, if a developer wanted to build more affordable housing, say an apartment building or townhouses or single family homes on smaller lots, local governments, plans say they're more than welcome to ask for the permission to do that. The way they ask is to request usually a rezoning or something called a conditional use or other kind of approvals. And these are what's known in the terms as a discretionary approval. That means the local government can either agree to it or not agree to it, pending public hearings and such. So what does that mean for affordable housing? The overview is developers really are motivated to make money and to make a profit. And in this environment where the one thing they're allowed to do by right without asking any special permission is to build single family homes, they tend to do mostly that. And in Delaware, the vast majority of our housing that is constructed are single family homes on largest lots that are a very high price point. We're not in Delaware, we're building plenty of housing in Delaware in terms of an overall number of housing, but we're building very, 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 very little housing that is anything but a single family home. What does that mean for affordability? It's very hard to find. Affordable housing takes many forms, but if you think about it, it's higher density housing, what we call missing middle housing, multifamily housing, apartment buildings. Those are very hard to get approved. So why do developers do this? Obviously, they want to take the easiest path to get to a profit. To them, time is money, and so if a process has more time to ask for this special approval, it's a risk that they don't want to take. They also have the risk at the very end of things of getting turned down, and so they will spend a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money getting their plans prepared, only to perhaps being turned down after, 6 months, a year and a half of hard work on their part. So what can we do about it? This is where, I think the other speakers are going to have a lot more insights, and I'm not going to steal any of their thunder. But I will say that nationwide, there's a movement to address the housing crisis by really what's generally termed as zoning reform, which is working with local governments and having them change their zoning laws so that they identify areas where missing middle and higher density and more affordable housing can be, and then change their zoning rules so that is what is permitted by right, and do other things to streamline or otherwise enable that housing to be built. So with that, I know there's probably going to be questions, and there's probably going to be a whole lot more detail about that sort of dynamic, and a lot more stories, I'm sure, of how the current system is really challenging, and some ideas of sort of how we can change things and things that we can do. So with that, I think my 15 minutes of fame are up for right now, and it is my role and my honor to introduce our next speaker. And I did see him here. Oh, here he is. Yep, he's there. Senator Russ Huxtable. I'm going to read I've got his bio here. Senator Russ Huxtable represents Delaware's 6th Senate District. He has over 20 years of experience in affordable housing nonprofits, including roles at In-Call Research, Interfaith Housing Alliance, and Milford Housing Development Corporation. I will say that since I have known him, he has absolutely been one of the most active legislators in the affordable housing area, and I think he is a great advocate for this cause, and I am honored to introduce Senator Huxtable. Please take it away, sir.
Thank you, David. I thought I wasn't sure what the order was, but I guess
You're first. You're first.
Okay.
I am
Well, thank
following
you
Mary's
all.
orders, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for being on this call and expressing an interest in affordable housing. It is one of the most critical needs I think our state is facing, and will help address issues that we have in healthcare, in our workforce shortages, in our educational system. I think housing obviously is a foundational issue, as David said. I actually got my started in Appalachia, working in Kentucky, and actually ended up coming back to Delaware. And one of our other speakers was actually one of my first bosses. Karen Speakman got me back into housing in Delaware in 1998. And then I had a long career, got a great establishment from In-Call. Neighbor Good, sorry, Karen. And from there, as a nonprofit leader and a housing advocate, I'd often go to the General Assembly and even to our federal delegation, asking for better investments, some additional policies that could help address affordable housing. And as probably many of you may have experienced that are on this call, you have great conversations and you don't feel like you make the progress that you need. So I figured I was sitting on the wrong side of the table. And so that prompted a run in 2022 to speak to this issue and many issues in my district. So, and we have done, I think we've done a great deal over the last 2 years in affordable housing. There's still a lot more work to do, and I'll explain some of that first. I was just going to give a little overview. We're about 20,000 units short of where we need to be in the affordable housing realm for Delawareans, to prevent those Delawareans from being cost burdened. In Delaware State Housing Authority's housing needs assessment, and Matt, I apologize if I'm stepping on your toes with some of this, 8% of Delawareans were homeless, living in their car or couch surfing. That includes, it's not just adults, that number also includes kids. And we want to make sure our education system is better than it is. Sometimes isn't just the teachers, it's also everything else that housing can help with. And so we know we have a shortage, we have an issue. What are we doing about it? From 1987 until 2022, the General Assembly invested $4 million into the Housing Development Fund. That is the primary vehicle in which Delaware does affordable housing development. In 2023, we made a $31.5 million investment from the general fund into the Housing Development Fund, as well as invested over $70 million from the American Rescue Plan Act. So a total investment over $100 million, which was sorely needed. Let's see, and then unfortunately, but I understand why, in 2024, that number went back to $4 million because what we had created over the last 20, 30 years was a affordable housing delivery system that could spend $4 million thereabouts dollars. And so when you octuple the investment that you put in, it's going to take a little longer for the processes to get those funds out and into the world. And so there was still money left over from the previous allocation. And so we went back down to 4 million. But I know there are many advocates who are seeking additional investments into affordable housing. Legislatively, some of the bills that we passed, we did Senate Bill 293, which was Senator Lockman, prohibits landlords from discriminating against tenants based on whether they receive housing assistance. Basically, if they are receiving a public assistance voucher, they cannot be discriminated against. The next few have my name on them. Senate Bill 22. We created a program. I realized the General Assembly was very comfortable in investing the $4 million into the Housing Development Fund. That was the pie that they invested in and kind of seemed, just focused on that. And so I wanted to create additional pies to attract additional investment. And we had a program called the Downtown Development District Program, which has been very successful in the state of Delaware, focused on some downtown corridors. Dave and Matt could talk more about that. But basically, we invested about $40 million into these downtown development district areas from the state and attracted nearly $500 million of private investment. But a lot of that was targeted for market rate housing or commercial development and things of that nature, was not tied specifically to outcomes regarding affordable housing. And again, those districts are small when you consider the size of Delaware. So we created the Delaware Workforce Housing Program, modeled on that program, and to hopefully attract additional investment. It got passed on June 30th. So while we codified a great program that has had demonstrated success, we couldn't get the funding there, but I'm sure there's a lot of advocates in this room who could certainly help make the case for additional investments in that program, which provides basically a grant of 20% on some of the costs as it relates to developing affordable housing in state strategies of spending levels 1 and level 2. Those are your downtowns and your adjacent downtowns. So it's where we want primarily a lot of development to happen. So we hope if we get some investment there, I'm sure it'll attract some private investment and maybe even some smaller units here and there, not larger complexes, but maybe some infill. And a great example in my district in Dewey, which is not a downtown development district area, you had the Grotto's Pizza, who was redeveloping one of their downtown restaurants in the corporate center, and they had considered putting some apartments above their restaurant, which was a great spot for it, right? To help the seasonal workers or even to help their full-time workers. However, the costs involved in putting those units in there did not pencil out. However, I don't know if Grotto's would have done this, but if they had this program, this could have helped make those numbers pencil out for them. Senate Bill 25 was a bill that reduced the improvement tax every time you build a building in the state of Delaware. And this one is particularly for if you are buying and renovating in either an existing building or an apartment complex or transitioning maybe like one of those office complexes that aren't really being used anymore. If you wanted to convert that into housing, State of Delaware charges a 2% improvement tax. So if you buy it for $10 million and you want to put $10 million into it, initially Delaware was charging 2% if you were just doing anything, even affordable housing. And so we reduced that fee for affordable housing to make it easier and less expensive, because it costs the same amount to develop a market rate unit as it does an affordable housing unit. But if you're trying to target people with $700 a month in rent compared to $2,000 a month in rent, you need to make those costs lower somehow. And that's why the workforce housing program, that's why the improvement tax. We also, Senate Bill 87, also clarified some affordable housing exemptions for first-time home buyers, so it would reduce the cost for them, and also included some additional work that nonprofits were doing, ensuring that those projects that they were doing that were new construction related also made sure that they were transfer tax exempt, so those costs could be passed along to those new owners. We also, I want all hands on deck. So we passed a bill regarding the county lodging tax. Each county charges a lodging tax, except for currently Kent County. And so we've just enabled them to use some additional resources that they gather for affordable housing, knowing that we need additional people to play a role in helping provide the investments that we need to make affordable housing happen. We worked on extending the Office of Foreclosure Prevention and Financial Education program through the Department of Justice. There's a mediation program. It's been working very successfully. Every 2 years or every 3 years, it would sunset, meaning like, okay, if we don't reenact this legislation, this great program that has saved a lot of homeowners, goes away. And so we realized, and Department of Justice realized, this is a good program. Why are we always having to renew a really good program? So we got rid of the sunset in that. And so we kept that program going. We created another pot of funds. Home repair is very important in the state of Delaware to preserve existing housing opportunities for folks who are in manufactured housing, home ownership units. But now, you know, when they bought those units originally, they may have been working families, but now they might be making $12,000, $13,000 a year on Social Security. And so we were trying just to attract additional investments into home repairs, because we know that's also a vital area to maintain affordability. And we did some work around manufactured housing. And somebody just give me like a signal if I'm going too long, like cut me off, okay? Because I could obviously talk about this forever. Dave, am I running out of time? Okay, thank you. Well, we also passed another bill. This is Representative Johnson that created the Affordable Housing Production Task Force. And today, Karen, all our speakers today actually are on that committee. So good job in getting the right speakers to this event. We actually finished our last meeting today. We've been meeting since, I believe, August of last year. And we've been meeting, we've broken up into 5 different subcommittees. We percolated a lot of ideas up to the main task force. We should have a report out soon. And basically, we still need to look at future legislation to help encourage affordable housing. Dave mentioned some of this stuff about regarding zoning. We'd like to look into zoning reform, how that can happen on a state level through the encouragement of our local jurisdictions, because while the state is bringing resources to the table, we also want to make sure that we're not subsidizing poor zoning decisions. And so we'd like to somehow work with our local jurisdictions that have zoning control to ensure that they are getting the reforms that they need. Because right now, a lot of them that I've heard from are so busy with what they currently have on their plate, they have a hard time planning for the future. And so if the state can play a role in providing some resources, some technical assistance to help them walk through the process, I think that would be encouraging and hopefully welcome. And so we're going to look at doing some of those things. We also want to look at obviously increasing funding opportunities for affordable housing. that can be done either, legislatively, or actually, we just really need to advocate for more resources. There's other things regarding the permitting and approval process that I think could be reviewed and revised to really incentivize the creation of affordable housing. So there's a lot of things that are on the plate that are being teed up. Some are currently being written, and then some will be more policy analysis will need to be done to kind of really shape the policy, work with a bunch of different stakeholders to ensure that we are successful. And again, one of the main things that we can do right now on the state level is provide additional investments. And I know that's particularly troubling right now with what's happening at the federal level with a lot of commitments, things that the federal government have done through administration over administration. It didn't matter, housing was important through the Housing Act of like 1936 and that are getting pulled back. And so it's troubling to see, and that's going to play a big role in moving forward to the state. So I wish I had great news on that. Just buckle up, basically, is what I can say on that one. So thank you for your time. I think we're probably moving questions at the end. Thank you so much for being engaged. This is really an important subject for Delawareans. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Senator Huxtable. Our next speaker, I'm going to introduce Director Matt Heckles. Matt Heckles is the Delaware's Housing Cabinet Director of the Delaware State Housing Authority. He previously served in the Biden-Harris administration as the Mid-Atlantic Regional Administrator for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I will add that he also previously worked for DSHA back when we developed the Downtown Development District program, and I knew him back then, and I'm very excited to have him back in Delaware working for us and with us on the issues of housing. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much, and for the opportunity to speak with all of you today, and thank you, Dave, for our long partnership, and Senator Huxtable. Anytime a legislator is going to take facts or data points or initiatives off of my speaking points, I am thrilled. You are an advocate for housing in the legislature that we haven't had before, and I think it's really important, and not only just caring about housing, but your career experience is really valuable because you get it at a different level than most people do. So, and of course, the League of Women Voters, thank you for the opportunity to talk about housing. This is something that I've spent my career doing. I started at DSHA in 2004, spent about 12 years there doing legislative and policy work. Worked on the state rental assistance program development, worked on the downtown development district programs. I ran our mortgage program for about 18 months, and then took a job with the state of Maryland, where I ran the housing finance agency for the state of Maryland for about 5.5 years before joining the Biden-Harris administration. So I've spent a lot of time and a lot of almost the entirety of my career working on housing and community development, policy and program administration. And so I'm really thrilled to be back in Delaware. We never moved, for the record. All of that was just long trips and long commutes. But it's great to be back, and really great to be back in this administration. Governor Meyer starts almost every housing conversation, whether he says it out loud or you just feel it, with a statement about housing being a human right. And if that's the place where you start, I think you've really started off the conversation in a really, really good place. So I want to talk about a couple of the things in the relatively short time that I've been back at DSHA. And someone asked me today, how my first couple of a few weeks have gone, and I said, well, sometimes it feels like a few years, and sometimes it feels like a few days. But my first priority is making sure that DSHA is the agency that we need it to be. that it has the capacity, the philosophy, the organizational structure to deliver the programs that we are entrusted by the legislature and the administration to deliver across Delaware. Um, and that we're creative. This is a time where housing affordability, we really do have a crisis. And again, I think Senator Huxtable did a great job explaining, the parameters of that. But for me, DSHA has to have the operational structure to be effective and creative and have an impact that goes beyond the funds that are allocated to us. But beyond that, one of the things that I think is really important for DSHA to do, and for me personally as the director of housing, is to be a leader on housing issues in the state. And so I see myself as having two jobs: the director of the housing authority, making sure that we are performing at a high level, and two, the director of housing for the state, making sure that we're providing leadership and ideas and support to all of our partners. DSHA is an agency where we finance a lot of single-family mortgage programs, for example. We finance the development of affordable rental housing. We provide grants to entities that are working on homelessness. We don't do a whole lot direct services. We partner. Almost everything that we do is through partnerships, and so that leadership is a piece that will make sure that we have all of the ideas, all of the people moving in the same direction. And again, Senator Huxtable, I think, did a great job of talking about housing supply. With my experience at the federal level, we were talking about a 4 to 7 million unit deficit. This is the new units that are needed across the country, across all of the different areas of the country, across all different income levels, across all different housing types, just pure units that we need. And that doesn't account for within that, I guess I should say, is the need for affordable housing. This lack of supply has created this downward pressure on the market. And the best way I think about it is that, if you've got a good job and you can rent an apartment for $2,000 a month, but you can't find a place to rent for that amount, you can't rent something at $3,000 a month. You're going to be pushed down towards $1,500 a month. And that family that can afford 15 now can't find that unit because somebody with a higher income is in it. And so they go and they get a lower rent apartment. And that just has this downward pressure on the entire system, the entire housing ecosystem. The problem is that what happens at the bottom is that there's nowhere for people to go. So the bottom is where we're seeing a squeezing out of people and families into subsidized housing programs that are meant to be safety nets. And so those subsidized housing programs are stressed. Right now we have in the neighborhood of 30,000, 32,000, depending on when you pull the data, families on our waiting list for Section 8 vouchers across the state. 30,000 families. And you also see that trickle into homelessness, where we have seen increases in homelessness across the country. Here in Delaware, the increase in unsheltered homelessness from 23 to 24 was about 58%. And as the senator mentioned, it's 80% adults and about 20% kids. And those are numbers that I think are really concerning. But when I think about the solutions, we can do a lot on affordable housing. We can do a lot on homelessness. But if the market isn't relieved of that downward pressure of a lack of supply, it's going to be very, very difficult. So this is a housing crisis that goes well beyond, I think, the scale and scope of what the state can do alone, and very much needs for us to create an environment where we are creating more housing, period. More housing in more dense areas in our downtowns, more housing that is multifamily and higher density. That is the type of community that people want these days. Dave mentioned that Delaware's created a lot of housing that is, a 2,500 square foot home on a half an acre lot. Not everybody wants that. First of all, they don't want to mow the lawn every Saturday, and they don't need that size home. If you build housing like that, it's going to be expensive. That's just how the economics of building that type of housing works. It's going to be a $6 to $7 to $800,000 and up home. So we haven't been building in Delaware the type of housing that we need to. So we do need to build more overall and meet that top line number, but it has to be done the right way. That top line number doesn't account for those displacements of supply and demand at the different income thresholds or by different housing types. And that's really what the task force has been looking at, strategies that the state can undertake to relieve pressure on the system overall, and specifically to produce more affordable housing. And again, DSHA's role is we offer first-time home buyers, income qualified first-time home buyers with mortgage assistance. We use taxes and bond financing to offer lower interest rates than the market can offer. We also offer down payment assistance and support housing counseling with those programs to empower buyers to be able to afford to buy a home. But we're also creating rental housing through our rental housing financing programs. And one of the things that, when I talk about DSHA being a stronger organization and being more creative, we are limited by how much of that we can do if all we do is partner our state funding up with the federal low-income housing tax credit program and other programs. So we have to become creative and look at different financing structures and different ways to do more than what we have been doing in the past. I don't know if this is entirely the right math, but if we continue to produce affordable housing in the way that we have, to get to 20,000 new units, you might be looking at, accomplishing that goal, assuming that we don't lose any along the way, or that that demand number doesn't change. We could probably get there in the next 100 years. Well, that's not gonna fix the problem, right? So we have to do something differently to increase the amount of housing that we're producing across the board and at those affordable rent levels. Another point I touched on a little bit, but about homelessness. When I have traveled around the country and through my work at HUD, learned a lot about how different jurisdictions are addressing housing needs across the board. But about 15 years ago, the federal Congress passed a piece of legislation. I know that's hard to believe, but 15 years ago they did it. And it was called the Hearth Act. And it required that local jurisdictions consolidate their federal funding in what's called the continuum of care. Delaware gets about $10 or $11 million a year in homelessness program funding through that process. Beyond the funding, that law required that the programs engage in best practices. Over that time, we have essentially learned what works, and maybe more importantly in homelessness, what doesn't work. And putting people into shelter is not the right answer. That just delays homelessness by however long you put them in that shelter. And so we know the country did a very good job in its efforts to end veterans' homelessness. And we did it for that particular population in the Obama administration. And we know how to do it. We just have to do that more for the broader population. And so if this administration in Washington gets rid of the continuum of care, and that even if they don't get rid of the funding, we lose that policy and sort of regulatory environment that has been forcing federal funds to be deployed according to what we know are best practices. And I think when I look around Delaware, the state's response to homelessness is very scattered. We have programs at DHSS, at DSHA, at the kids department. We're all over the place, and we aren't unified in the vision and the sort of mandating of those best practices. So I think it's really important for us to undertake a process where we get those state agencies together and find all of the homelessness associated programs, the housing and the supportive services, and we know that it takes both, and catalog them and make sure that we are deploying them in a way that maximizes their impact. When Governor Meyer was county executive, you probably heard about the Hope Center in Newcastle County. It was a pandemic response, but it is a model of how to serve people experiencing homelessness. It is a place where people can go and have stable housing while they get the rest of the things that they need to get right, to get back into permanent supportive housing, with all of the supportive services being right there on site. And, I was so proud of what my home state of Delaware was doing that, when I had the opportunity, I brought the Secretary of HUD, I brought the Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness to the Hope Center to both show them what we were doing, but also validate. These were folks who know about homelessness and had seen a lot of different communities respond, and they agreed that the Hope Center is really the way to go. We need more of that. We need that we need similar types of programs in Kent County and Sussex County. And we need to make sure that essentially all of our homeless response system is employing that short-term shelter, homeless diversion first, shelter with supportive services, and a pathway to permanent supportive housing going forward. As Senator Huxtable said, I mean, this is all harder because of what's happening at the national level. Just a couple of weeks ago, the administration ended fair housing grants coming to Delaware, which means that Class C will have a harder time doing fair housing testing and representing clients who have been discriminated against. That, I think, is really just the first of the funding sources that we will see diminished. And again, even if the funding sources aren't, the step back of the federal government from supporting communities in this work is already happening by the reduction in employment at HUD and other agencies like that. It just means to me that this is a time where the states and local municipalities have to step up, counties and local governments have to step up and step into that void. And it's going to make it harder. It's always hard. It's always disappointing in a way to have, again, as someone who has spent most of my career in this work, I am thrilled that there are people who are spending their Thursday evening talking about housing. I am thrilled that it is that what has always been of interest to me is of interest to all of you. But it's also scary because we know that this is a big challenge. That's a sign of this being a big challenge, and the environment is making it harder for us to take advantage of this attention on housing, this attention by regular citizens and our neighbors on affordable housing, on homelessness, and wanting to see something good happen. My fear is that the environment is going to make it really hard for us to take advantage of that attention. I know the governor and people like Senator Huxtable in the legislature and all of you on the call are going to help us to get over those challenges and make sure that Delaware is a leader in housing going forward. So I look forward to your questions. It is late in the day, so go easy on us, but always happy to have a conversation about housing and community services and all of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Next, I'm going to introduce Karen. Karen Speakman is the Executive Director of Neighborhood Partners, formerly InCall, and has served as the President of the Delaware Chapter of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. She is a recipient of their Housing Ambassador Award, and I have known Karen for many years, and I will say, just from my personal experience with the Downtown Development District program, her organization has made a tremendous impact in the city of Dover in particular, in really changing some neighborhoods and accomplishing some revitalization and some affordable housing that has really been commendable. So thank you for that, Karen, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, David. Gosh, so you've heard a lot about there's not enough supply, right? That's certainly, and we've been ignoring this problem for, I would say, more than 40 years. We have not been developing enough housing for a long time. So, and finally, how the housing crisis is affecting all incomes, all of the continuum from homelessness to people that are very wealthy. So it's a significant problem. At Neighborhood Partners, we receive calls daily how to find housing, being evicted, What do I do? I don't have anywhere to live, and more. And we have very few places to send people to try to find an apartment, for instance, for them to rent. When the Housing Stability Program was announced providing rental financial assistance this summer, we received over 700 calls within 3 months about needing financial rental assistance. We can counsel and coach households on how to become homeowners, and then we do that really well. And we have financial coaches as well that are available for anyone who wants to resolve any kind of financial situation, like from how do I save money? How do I buy a car? How do I fill out the FAFSA form? And with this, really, our work is really involves improving people's credit scores, reducing their debts, managing their money, how to save for purchasing a home, and how to shop for a good loan product, and how to look for a house. But we often find that our customers can't find a house that they can afford, or when they make an offer, they're outbid by someone who can pay cash, like those moving into Delaware. So I hope you all are longtime Delawareans. And if you're not, that's okay too, because we need new people in our state. But this is what's happening. And it's very, very frustrating for these lower income families that are trying to buy a house. But buying a house is possible. It's just harder. It takes a great deal of persistence. We have assisted over 10,600 families through our term of being an organization in housing to buy a house. Last year, we in fact counseled over 600 families for about homeownership and assisted 207 to buy a house. What is also causing this housing unaffordability is the cost of constructing a house. So just to share with you, so like David shared, we with Habitat, Central Delaware Habitat, have built 68 new houses in downtown Dover. We're building houses that are 3-bedroom, 2.5 baths, 1,700 square feet, and it's costing between $250,000 and $300,000 for that house, land and infrastructure. In order to reduce the cost of the house to be affordable to our customers, we have to seek grant funding. Thank goodness Delaware State Housing Authority has a number of good programs that we utilize, so that we can sell it for $200,000 or $250,000, depending on how much the cost of the total package has been. For new subdivisions, we're seeing costs of over $100,000 per lot for just site improvements, not including the land. So just consider that. So we're not starting off the bat with $100,000 for improvements, maybe $30,000, $40,000 for the land per lot, and then you put a house on top of it. So all those costs have to be dealt with, and in terms of providing a new home. So it's all, so what are the main ingredients that are affecting this lack of supply for housing? It's really all about money and land. Zoning in particular has been a barrier for a number of years, and David certainly said, I think all three really addressed it in some manner. Particularly limited zoning has been available for multifamily housing. That's usually called R3 in a zoning terms. And that allows for multifamily housing to be built without any kind of changes to it. There's still typically a public hearing, but there's no changes to the process in getting it approved. We were looking for that kind of zoning in Sussex County last year. We found 2 sites that were zoned that, and only one is buildable. The other one is a wooded wetlands, so it's just not available. So there's a great need for zoning reform, which was talked about. Greater density, increasing the number and types of units. Kent County just recently passed some great improvements to their zoning code, allowing for more smaller lots, reduced parking. We'd like to see promoting infill development, promoting development near transit-ready areas when possible. And in addition, the process needs to be expedited. And these are all things that are going to be coming out of the Affordable Housing Task Force that will be shared in a few months. The process can take a long time, and that costs money as well. Another barrier that we see is NIMBYism, not in my backyard. No one likes to see a field developed unless it's for their own house, I've decided. So it's especially true of NIMBYs not liking or wanting rental housing near them. It's really due to false myths and beliefs. New rental housing for affordable, for lower income families, working poor, does not lower people's house values. It's really well built and well maintained. And I like to sort of say, well, where will our neighbors and our children live if we don't develop housing for all? We also need to stop giving the NIMBYs a voice. Jurisdictions need to stop requiring public hearings for projects that are being developed in accordance with the zoning code or only asking for a few variances. Let's make it easier to develop affordable housing. We also need to stop requiring all the new improvements be placed upon the development of housing. It's sort of interesting if you have a intersection, the first development, the second development, the third development don't pay for the improvement of that intersection, but the fourth one does. And we need to look at other ways to make this more equitable. We also have to get the private market developers involved, or we're not going to solve this housing crisis. We have some great nonprofit developers and some great for-profit developers that focus on affordable housing, but we need more developments and more developers to develop that housing. Lastly, insufficient funding has been allocated for the development of affordable housing in the state. Our present rate of affordable housing development is about 250 to 300 rental units a year, and I'm guessing about 200 a year of for sale affordable housing. Presently, between the budget and the bond bills, the state has been funding affordable housing at about $23 million a year. It's been up and down due to some federal infusion of money, but that's been for a while between the state budget and the bond bill, about $23 million. This year, the proposed budget is at $40.5 million, which is a great improvement. We're hoping that Governor Meyer will look at maybe some more than that, but that may be next year. We'll see. But as shared earlier, we're currently 20,000 units. And right now, there's a campaign going on for 1% for housing, 1% of the state budget for housing. It's being sponsored by the Delaware Association of Realtors, Delaware Affordable Housing Coalition, of which Neighborhood Partners is a member of that, Housing Alliance Delaware, and the Home Builders Association of Delaware. I will put in the chat the link for that. We're simply encouraging people to advocate with their state legislators for 1% for housing, 1% of the state budget for housing. So if you'll email your legislators, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm hoping that our governor and state legislators will increase funding for affordable housing, and I'm excited about the various accommodations and recommendations that the Affordable Housing Production Task Force will be making. I'm fearful, as shared earlier, about what's going to happen with the federal government. There are a number of well-proven housing programs that the federal government funds, and without those, the state cannot possibly replace that funding. So we need to be advocating also at that level for increased housing, money for housing or programs, at least keeping them the way they are. There's some great programs that both HUD and USDA rural development provide. So I think that's, if we don't do that, we're going to have more homelessness. Let's just face it. That's what's going to happen. So we need to keep advocating. So thanks for letting me speak and share.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all. Vicki, I don't know how are you going to take it from here and do questions?
I believe
okay.
Christy is going to forward questions.
Hi.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for a great presentation. We have some questions that have already been answered in the chat, and I'm going to read a couple of them. And then, of course, I have questions for all of you. First question from Bobby. How can Delaware integrate affordable housing development with strategies to attract and retain healthcare professionals to ensure accessible care for its residents. That's all part of the triad of how we make Delaware successful. Who would like to start? Any feedback on that?
I'm happy to give it a shot.
Thank you, Matt.
So this is, I think there was another comment, and good schools.
Mhm.
When I first started talking to Governor Meyer before he was Governor Meyer, he was looking at the cost of living, and realizing, of course, that housing is a big piece of that. And the way I think about it too is, I think Delaware's had this sort of deal with its citizens that we're a relatively low tax state. We have good jobs, pretty high quality of life, and a pretty affordable housing system that offers a pretty low cost of living. One of the reasons that even though I worked in Maryland for 5 years, that we didn't leave Delaware is that it's really hard to move to a place where the cost of living is high. And that's been a great advantage for Delaware. So whether you're talking about the healthcare professional industry, or attracting teachers, or attracting other jobs generally, affordable housing has been part of Delaware's proposition. And that's one of the reasons I think this is even more important here in Delaware. If you think about what Delaware has to offer, if our housing prices are in the same range as Montgomery County, Maryland, or outside of New York City, that whole proposition becomes a lot more difficult for us to have a strong economy and be able to do the things that allows us to do. So whether it's for the healthcare industry or education, it's really important that we get this housing question answered correctly, so that we avoid the repercussions of not having a low cost of living, and a comparatively low cost of living, and low housing prices. There's another component to this, though, too, I think, and that's the cost of housing, of caring for people in the healthcare space, whether they be long-term care facilities or other healthcare environments, at a higher level of care because of a lack of affordable housing. And this happens a lot more than I think people realize. And so one of the things that the Hope Center is doing now, for example, is partnering with Christiana Care, so that some of the space at the Hope Center is available for people to have respite care, so that they can leave the hospital setting, cost the hospital less, but also be in an environment that's better for them. If you don't need that level of care, being in a hospital or long-term care facility is not what's best for the individual, and it costs too much to the system as well. So there's a partnership there too, between not only the healthcare industry and housing for its employees, but the healthcare industry and its patient relationship to housing as well. So it's really important. I've seen some good models, especially in places like Baltimore, where Johns Hopkins is doing some great work around housing. In Pittsburgh, where UPMC is investing in housing. There's a realization that there is this really strong potential partnership between healthcare and housing that is beneficial to the healthcare industry. I think Delaware might be a little slow in getting to that point, but I think that again, that tide is turning a little bit here too, and we're hearing more from the healthcare industry about getting involved in housing work.
Thank you, Matt. To connect with what you just said, we're all very impressed with what's happened in Newcastle County. As a resident of Sussex County, I will tell you, I know that there are families that had to go to Newcastle County. That was the only facility. So we're hoping to, what hope can you offer Kent and Sussex County in having a facility similar to what is in Newcastle County in our counties, and all to address the needs of homelessness, as well as If we want to advocate for the kind of partnership that you just described with Christiana Care, should we be talking to Bay Health? Should we be talking to BB? What's your thoughts on that?
The last part, yes, and it's on the list.
I knew that was the answer.
On the first part, that's one. I mean, the governor, coming from Newcastle County executive, he is very proud of the accomplishment of the Hope Center in Newcastle County, the Newcastle County Hope Center. As governor, he is now newly concerned with Kent and Sussex counties, and very much wants to replicate that that best practice in those counties where not only do we not have a Hope Center type of facility, but generally homelessness is does not have as strong of a system, I would say, in Kent and Sussex counties, and manifests, I think, differently as well.
Yes, yeah.
And those numbers that we were talking about before, the what was the number? Something along the, that we counted in the point in time count was 1,400 people in Delaware at the end of in the 2024 count. That doesn't, we know that doesn't count a lot of people who are who most of us would think of as homeless, right? So they first have to meet the definition of homelessness that's established sort of in federal code. It doesn't count kids that are couch surfing. It doesn't count people that we can't find because they they don't want to be found sometimes. It doesn't count people who are unstably housed, who are doubled up. In the New American community, there's a lot of overcrowding in spaces that if we were to decrowd and sort of make those family structures such that they have housing that meets their needs, then there would be homelessness counted in those families. So it's a much bigger problem than just what our point in time count can reveal. And again, I think that there's a huge need in Kent and Sussex counties that that we haven't addressed yet. This is one of the areas where while I know that the governor is not losing faith 2 months in, is concerned about the headwinds at the federal level and other resources being strained, and whether or not things that we know that we need to do, like the development of Hope Centers in or similar facilities in Kent and Sussex counties, whether or not we have the resources to do that, given our budget constraints.
So looking at, we're all well aware of the federal crisis, to be honest, and lack of support, whether it's education, healthcare, or housing. Matt, what do you think are some creative ideas here in Delaware that we can do to overcome this? I mean, I'm asking you, 1776, what did they do? What are we going to do?
Are you talking about a revolution?
No, I'm just saying that, we need to.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Not at all talking about it.
You accept invitations to these kind of webinars, you never quite know who's on the other end of the line.
No, not at all. I'm just saying, people thought outside of the box at that time. How should we be thinking in terms of how to get support for housing? Have you seen any models in other states? That's what I'm looking for.
Well, quite frankly, right now it's the unknown. I'm hoping that we can build into our systems some flexibility. I mentioned the reduction, the elimination of the fair housing grant. That's $425,000. It does a lot of really good work in fair housing here in Delaware. But who knows? HUD is talking about a reduction of 80% of the people who work in the CPD division, which is the Community Development Block Grant Program, the homelessness programs, the home investment partnership programs. If there's a corresponding decrease in funding, that's obviously something that would be really difficult to overcome. If it's a reduction in funding because they plan to block grant that funding to the state, it's a very different situation. We have to then increase our capacity to administer those funds, but that's a better problem than not having the funding at all. what if they get into eliminating the Section 8 voucher program or reducing it? They
Yeah.
did in the continuing resolution reduce the budget for Section 8 vouchers pretty dramatically. It's something that I think can be absorbed by public housing authorities generally through turnover, but that is fewer resources available for rental subsidies. But I don't know what they're going to do tomorrow, and that uncertainty, I think, requires the state to be flexible. And so that is something that I want to make sure that we're trying to do, again, with capacity at DSHA and with our partners, but also in our funding to make sure that we have the ability come tomorrow or November of next year or into the next year, that we have the flexibility to make sure that we can prioritize where the impacts are going to be greatest and try to fill those gaps the best way that we can. We've got to be coordinated and smart about it, but having flexibility because of the uncertainty is really important moving forward too.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry if I sounded a little, out there. So Russ, I wanted to ask you to go back to one of the comments you made. You were talking about the workforce housing, and was that not funded? There was not a fiscal note, or could you clarify that for me?
We passed we codified the program in June 30th of last year after we did the budget. So we didn't have any money. However, and this is the weird thing with the transition between one administration and the other.
Yeah.
The budget that folks are looking at, that's the governor's recommended budget, is actually the leftover, is the budget that Governor Carney introduced, not necessarily the budget that Governor Meyer has introduced. And so when we talk about governor's recommended budget, that's actually printed out and available, actually Governor Carney's. So there's obviously going to be some changes, some different priorities, things of that nature. You give that, we want to see what Governor Meyer has. But at least in Governor Carney's recommended budget, they did seek $8 million for the Delaware Workforce Housing Program that would help incentivize and take some of the risk out of developing housing for lower income families.
So how can we support you in moving forward? Through advocacy, what can
right. So when you guys go visit your legislators or your representatives, say, hey, look, what a great place to park $8 million, Delaware Workforce Housing Program. And so that's what you do. I mean, right now I know there is that campaign that Karen mentioned about the 1% toward housing. And this is one way to get there, so just be.
So we could do that in concert with Karen's suggestion.
Yeah. So they could park some money, 1%. Where is that money going to be parked? And what we've created some mechanisms that are in code and are kind of like saying, like, hey, I'm a basket, you can put some money in, and that's obviously always helpful, so people know where it's going toward. And there's been demonstrated success with the DDD program, so it's something legislators that have been there, longer than I have, are familiar with, and so that's a very comforting thing when they've seen a program, seen the success of that program, and say, you know what, let's replicate that, but like specifically for affordable housing.
Thank you. And Dave, I wanted to ask you, talking about zoning, and I think we have a relative elementary understanding of zoning in Delaware. Our local council, Sussex County, Kent County, Newcastle County council meetings where we should show up to support changes in zoning to allow for more affordable housing from your perspective?
Yeah, and again, I'm appreciate the question. I always love talking about zoning and things of that nature. So slow me down if I get too excited. But I think one thing that just bears saying again is that local governments have been delegated the authority for comprehensive planning and zoning in Delaware by the state legislature. And so it is their responsibility to do that. One of the best ways and the best times to advocate for changing the sort of future of the community, the rules that the community operates under, is frankly the comprehensive plan process, where really the community should have those discussions about what are our needs as a community. Housing is a need. What are our goals regarding housing? We need more affordable housing. Where are we going to put it is the real hard question, and how is it going to be done? And I think what I alluded to in my brief summary at the beginning is, in very general terms, I don't think many local governments go far enough at that comprehensive planning stage to make the hard decisions with their communities they need to make to be comfortable changing that zoning to have multifamily or higher densities or smaller lots by right. So if your community is working, the comprehensive plan, the other thing with the comprehensive plans is they get updated every 10 years. So it is a sort of a rolling schedule of whenever your local government had their last comprehensive plan, when does 10 years come up? They don't always wait a full 10 years. And there are times when there are really important issues in communities where they do open their comprehensive plans up and they do amendments, and they do special sections. And I think what I would really like to see, and hopefully some of the energy we have here tonight and some of the energy coming out of the Affordable Housing Production Task Force, is local governments opening their plans up and finding ways to really talk through with their communities and gain the buy-in and gain ability to see their communities in a different way and make those hard decisions. And so if I were any of you living in a local government, be it a county or a municipality, I would be talking with your local elected officials about the comprehensive plan and about the zoning ordinance, and talking about how, what the challenges are, what they can do to change it, and really starting that conversation up at that community level. And I will, not to confuse things, but, my observation is this: most of the local government comprehensive plans, if not all of them, say good things about housing. They just haven't implemented it far enough to the zoning level. So I don't think there's any reason in most cases that a local government could not, with the consent and the input of the community, make those zoning changes now without even having to go through their whole comprehensive plan process. But again, it would have to be any change like that will be a whole community conversation, and there will be controversy because of what Karen said, I think, which is, nobody, everybody sees a field next to them and they're concerned about what that might be someday in the future. And what if it's multifamily housing? Oh my goodness, we can't have that. Well, yes, we can. And yes, we should. How do we have that conversation ahead of time? Because when a developer, be it a nonprofit like, Neighborhood Partners, or a for-profit developer comes in, when they open up that conversation, it takes a long time, it's very uncertain, and they have a high probability of being turned down at the last minute, and they won't take that risk. So how do we have that conversation ahead of time? That's
Thank you.
Dave, if I could just add, I think there's a really interesting sort of political component to this that maybe we want to touch on. And Senator, if you have some comments on it, that would be great too. The incentive at the local level is usually to, think about it this way. The people who come out to those meetings tend to be motivated to make sure that the zoning changes are not going to have this terrible impact that they think they will have. And
they fear.
they're generally anti-growth, anti-density, and I get it. Part of me understands that completely because of the way that our zoning laws have behaved. They've given us the results of our zoning laws that were established, as Dave mentioned earlier, decades ago, have given us decades of single family homes on half-acre lots. And people, I think they don't want that. The hard part now is saying, all right, guys, listen, when we talk about zoning changes, we're talking about changing that dynamic. We're not talking about doing more of that. We're talking about doing it differently. And but still, people are pretty programmed to come out and oppose new development because of, again, what they've gotten out of that deal. So we have to make sure that we educate people on what zoning changes we hope local jurisdictions make if they are good in terms of increasing density, increasing, community and livability and lowering housing prices. We need to have advocates who show up and say, yeah, you know what, that is the kind of new development that we want to see. And at the local level, people think of land use being a local issue. And so it rises way up to the top in terms of a priority for a councilman, for a city councilman. And the 100 people who show up at the meeting out of 101 of them tend to be in opposition to this kind of stuff. So it's important for the people who understand what we're trying to do, I think, to show up and support good change at the local level going forward.
Yeah, and if I may just add, we talk about density, and sometimes that can be a scary thing. But when you talk about density, you're talking about less sprawl. When you make investments in public infrastructure, roads, streets, public transportation, you can see that better, more clearly if you actually have denser developments. If you have sprawl, you'll have intersections that are way out there that need to be improved as well, as all these others. But if you bring it in, you make improvements, you can see that investment more clearly. It can happen actually faster because instead of spreading your resources all over like this, you can bring them in a little tighter. And we've had I know in some meetings we've had former Secretary Ann Canby speak about livable, walkable communities. How do you get livable, walkable communities? You got to be denser and multi-use and things of that nature. And I live in an example of one that was actually a controversial neighborhood when it was first developed. I think it's at 6.4 units to the acre. We probably could have put more in this neighborhood and you wouldn't have noticed it. And I don't have to get onto Route 1 to go to the grocery store. I could walk to the store, or the drugstore and things of that nature. And so those are the sorts of developments that we also need, realizing that, it's not just your housing costs, but it's housing and transportation. And so how do we make things less expensive for a Delaware family? It's going to be through zoning reform, density and less sprawl. I think that can also be impactful for beneficial for the environment as well.
Great point, Rustin. I think it's
Well said.
important.
Thank you.
Yes, and to the focus is for all families. What can we do for all families here in Delaware?
Yes.
Right.
So that's all I have.
It'd be great if you all become YIMBYs, right? Yes, in my backyard.
Yes, yeah.
So there's some really great
amen.
questions in the chat. So can I address some of that?
Absolutely.
So in terms of one about how do we provide more housing for people that work in the health industry, or the tie between that, or the providing more housing for healthcare workers and and for those CNAs and that type of thing. Again, it does relate to density. It does relate to how do we lower the cost? Smaller units, smaller lots. There have been some first responder programs that have provided some down payment and settlement programs. Those are other ways. There's a number of different programs through DSHA that we combine with a first mortgage, either through DSH with a bond program or these special down payment settlement programs for certain, in general for everybody, but there have been some specific groups that there have been special programs like first responders in the past. Also, private developers, if there's a hospital, have you seen what's going on around the Bay Health New in Milford, what's being built up around that?
Yes.
There's some new housing units. There are townhouses. I don't know if there's maybe the rentals are for sale, but either way,
Oh yeah.
housing is being built because there's a new employer, and the health industry needs places for their workers to live, particularly close, right?
And can I just give a little plug for Milford? I worked with the city of Milford in my role, my previous role with the Office of State Planning Coordination. We worked for 3 years on the master plan for Southeast Milford. And what that meant was we had these community conversations with large groups of people. Some wanted preservation, some wanted development. We worked with DelDOT on the overpass, the infrastructure. The city was there getting ready with the utilities and planning and engineering. The city engineered the utility network in that area, and developers just had to build it. DelDOT planned the roads, and developers just had to plug into that system. And you know what? When Bay Health Hospital was ready to find a new location in Milford, where did they get land? But on the commercial area that was designed for that area, because it was ready to be built. And all that housing around there, that was a conversation. I was in the room when we had this. Everybody was like, no, 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 we just want single family homes. We want single family homes. But the facilitators, and I was one of them, were saying, well, what about your children? What about what about the workers? What about people who need a workforce housing unit? What kind of community do you really want to be in Milford? And that was in, that was, actually thought out at that point in time. And, here we have, and it's taken a long time. That was 2012, 2013, but here we are in 2026, and we have a gigantic new hospital. We have new moors, we have the townhouses, we have other development in the area. So that's, one of my examples of sort of good planning done well by a local government and state agencies working together that's led to a great opportunity.
Good.
Let's do more.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's another one about manufactured home communities and getting ownership. So it could work with a community land trust. It's difficult. The homeowners in a planned, I guess, where they're leasing the land in a neighborhood, I think they have, if they don't have their first right to buy it, they
Right
could.
of first offer.
Right of first offer too. But often for these homeowners to gather together and buy that complex, that community, is not easy to do, and there aren't very many financial institutions that will lend for that purpose. There are a few, and we've worked with some of them, and we are one as well. We have a community development financial institution ourselves. We lend money, but it's organizing those homeowners. It's a difficult process, but it could be where a nonprofit is the community land trust comes in and buys that facility and then continues to let people, the land trust will own the land and the folks will own their homes. So
yeah. And just with that, sorry, Karen. So you have the right of first offer for the existing community. And it's hard to put all those resources together to get to the level of where they need that debt service. And then you have private equity that's coming in at 50% more, 100% more, and offering that like in cash, because we have such a scarcity of housing. And so those values are going up. You're losing your local owners. And private equity is getting those existing communities. So it's really difficult with state. We don't have the investment level to meet that, to meet what the private equity is coming in with, which is unfortunate. But that's the issue. We've lost actually 6,800 units over the last 15 years, and some of that's probably policy related. Some of that's the market related and change of use and things of that nature. So and creating new is actually really difficult because of the issue we talked about with NIMBY and things of that nature. It's really difficult to get any new manufactured housing communities established. Now, I'm not even sure when the last one approved was. Maybe like 20 years ago, I think. I think there was one that had an overlay outside of Ellendale, but they actually ended up going with single family homes in there instead of manufactured housing. because it was, you know, less controversial and they could just, you know, so.
But they're going to improve is the manufactured housing. So let's, you know, acknowledge that too. It's modular housing is virtually like stick built. So,
yeah,
but it's the parks where people rent the land in those instances when it's all contained and owned by a private entity can be difficult, and it's difficult to have some solutions for those families, honestly.
I think we've reached the end of our time tonight. I really want to thank the panel for what they've contributed tonight. This year, the League has selected to use a Venn diagram to show how the problems intersect education, healthcare, and housing. And I think you've helped us tonight to really bring that forward. Once again, I remind everyone we'll have League Day on April 8th at Christ Church in Dover, and Senator Huxtable has agreed to be on our panel that day. We will have a panel of legislators. It starts at 9 a.m. and the information can be found on our Delaware League of Women Delaware website. So thank you so much to everyone, and I just can't thank you enough for your insight tonight.
Great.
well,
Very
thank you.
welcome. Thanks
And
for
thank
having
you to the
us.
league. Yeah, thank you very much. It's always great to speak with you all.
All right. Thank you.
Good
Good
evening,
night,
everybody.
everyone.